The Sunset Strip Diaries, Chapter 9. Cat Fight. One night, Brent Muscat, a faster pussycat, started hanging around our crowd. He was a friend of Raz's, so he was always kind of around in the background. He confided in Raz about his songwriting and his life and whatnot. His band was bigger by that time and more famous in my scene than when I was younger and had only seen him in the metal years. He came to the condo to have beers while everyone got ready, and I stupidly called Jimmy from Raz's room to tell him I was leaving for Hollywood. Brent saw that I was all nervous talking to my boyfriend and wanted to cause some trouble amongst us lay people. He started playing around with me while I was trying to talk on the phone, grabbing one of my legs and trying to lift it into the air until I screamed. I was trying to remain composed to talk to Jimmy, but Brent was determined to distract me, and I remember saying, "Yeah, can you hold on just a minute?" and then slamming Brent in the head 5 times with the phone receiver as he laughed and tried to block me, the coiled cord becoming all tangled around us. And when I got back on the phone, Jimmy was furious. He didn't know who was in the background, and it would not be long before he found out. The next weekend, I was back with my friends in the hot tub at Dusty's condo. I sat there in my zebra print bikini from Marshall's, cursing myself for not being prepared with something cooler to wear. Through the rising steam, I looked at the tags on some of the dancers' bright string bikinis. They were all from a place called Zig Ann's of Hollywood. Ooh, another place I need to check out. I saved up weeks of lunch money and got a ride there one day. It was on Hollywood Boulevard, not far from the huge Art Deco Fredericks of Hollywood building that housed a small museum of movie stars' lingerie. Once again, the Walk of Fame was on the sidewalk I was using to get there. I looked down as my feet walked over the coral pink granite stars laid inside a gray background. They each had a little symbol to show the honorees' field, music, TV, film, etc. Some stars had bouquets of fresh flowers on them, and others I had to go around because tourists were taking pictures next to them. I got a little heartsick when I walked over James Cagney's star. I loved Yankee Doodle Dandy when I was a young teenager. I smiled and looked over the other names. Alfred Hitchcock, Count Basie, Alan Hale. I stopped at a glass storefront full of headless mannequins wearing brightly colored string bikinis. Oh, this had to be it. Wow! It was so cool looking. It was clearly the place for stage bikinis. I recognized the styles from pictures of those mud wrestlers from the Hollywood Tropicana and the dancers at the Body Shop. I went inside and looked through racks of brightly colored string. Many were sequined or day-glow, and they were all really teensy-tiny styles that barely covered your private parts. Some were breakaway so they could be torn off. My chest was real and not perfect hard balls, so the little spider web bikini tops in glowing violet did not look good on me. All the bikinis were unlined and would be completely see-through if they got wet, but they weren't for swimming, they were for working the pole on a stage. Why I thought this was so glamorous, I do not know. I looked through clear drawers of sequined pasties out of curiosity. They were in every color from bright magenta to rainbow sparkles. There were boxes of glue sticks next to the drawers for keeping things in place. They were regular kindergarten glue sticks. I was surprised that the girls used that on their skin. There were large, puffy feather boas hanging in colorful bunches on the wall. There were purple chandelle boas with hot pink tips, baby blue ostrich feathers, and dense black swan feathers. Some of the boas were so thick that they looked heavy. I felt like I was backstage in a Vegas showgirl's dressing room. All of the crazy bikinis intimidated me. I wasn't quite that confident. I looked and looked through the racks and ended up picking an all-white bikini. It was pretty standard. Brazilian cut bottom, triangle top. I looked decent in the thing, so I bought it. It was so tiny that the bag they gave me was only big enough to hold some earrings. I was happy to be ready for the next hot tub night. At least I would fit in with the girls. Lo and behold, I was invited to Dusty's to drink and go in that hot tub again on another night. Brent Muscat joined us that night and took to teasing me about having a boyfriend. Any sort of attention flattered me, of course, but I could see he was just doing it because it was bothering me so much. When the night was over, I changed out of my bikini and back into my normal clothing. I wasn't carrying a purse, so I had nowhere to put my bikini. I stuffed it in a pair of black socks. And when Brent drove me home later, the ball of socks rolled out into his car. Raz told me later that Brent thought I did it on purpose and was convinced I liked him. I certainly did not do it on purpose. I was dying, hoping there was no yucky crust in the bottom of my underwear. I mean my bikini. Jimmy came over the next day. We were washing his car in the driveway when my mom came out the screen door a little too delighted. Right in front of Jimmy, she said, yeah, some guy named Brent Muskrat called and said you left something in his car. He said he will come by and drop it off. Jimmy looked at me and said, you left something in Brent Muskrat's car? What were you doing with him in the first place? I scrambled to try and explain myself. On a weekend soon after that, Raz called me and invited me to a party at their place. I said I could not come because Jimmy was over and he told me to bring him along. I really did not want to bring Jimmy into my private little world. I was nervous the guys would rat me out for doing something flirty or risque or inappropriate, probably the same reasons Jimmy kept me from his crowd. But on the other hand, I kind of wanted to get the tension out of the way. If Jimmy finally met them and saw that they were harmless, quote-unquote harmless, he wouldn't get so mad at me for going out with them every weekend. I finally realized that they would have to meet so I could put the whole thing to rest. Jimmy and I walked up to the door and Raz answered. I held my breath. When he first saw Jimmy, he made a horror-stricken face to me. When Jimmy looked away, as if to say, "This is your boyfriend? The guy who you were choosing all of the prime cuts of meat we are presenting you with?" I was very uncomfortable. I wanted to turn around and leave. Then Raz said, "Come over here, you bitch, and give me a hug." Jimmy appeared annoyed that he was taking such an informal tone with me. I went over to Raz and he whispered under his breath, "I do not approve." He made so many faces of disgust. I was sure Jimmy would catch him. He didn't. It crushed me that Raz was critiquing the person I loved so much. After about 5 minutes of Raz snickering, I told Jimmy we should go. And on the way home, he commented that Michael seemed like a dick and Raz seemed pretty cool. He had no clue. Jimmy did something out of left field that winter. He somehow ran into the vampire bats of Drop Dead Gorgeous, the band Christabel and I hung out with over the summer prior. He said that they had parted ways with their singer and they were looking for a replacement and that he thought he might want to give it a shot. Whoa, wait, what? I didn't know Jimmy was interested in joining a band. I didn't even know he could sing. He had been content with being an artist and a scenester, but it seemed that he was now entertaining the thought of being a musician. I was pissed. Why did he have to pick that band of all bands to join? The offer fell through after a few weeks. The fit was not right in one way or another, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But my relief was premature. Jimmy decided he was going to start a band. When he told me, I immediately choked on my rice-a-roni. My eyes were watering as I tried to dislodge a piece of vermicelli from my windpipe. Did he ask his own buddies from his own scene to be in his band? No, he asked Trisha's overgrown ape of a boyfriend to be his bass player. My jaw was hanging open for so long that 10 flies must have flown in my mouth. Couldn't this guy pick people other than the ones I knew? In January of 1991, the United States went to war with the Middle East. The news called it Desert Storm. I was actually concerned in between drinking beers. I pictured myself in black and white film. There I was, clad in a 1940s dress and a sergeant hat, singing the boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B, while bombs went off in the background and sailors cheered in the audience. When I was at school, it hit me harder. We were assigned commentaries in journalism class, so we sat around watching the grainy night vision footage on an old TV as we click-clacked on our typewriters. I was afraid of things I had never considered before. What if it got much, much worse? What if we were bombed? What if there was a draft? What if we had to start rationing food? We were children of the 80s. We had never seen a war. Something that could bring hard times. Something that could even bring death. Those thoughts were new to us. I thought of the people who were actually fighting for our country, and I was stunned at what heroes they were. I didn't know anyone like that. Everyone I knew was wearing more makeup than the entire cast of Cats, and had pants so tight they had moose knuckles. Okay, 2 things happened around then that set me back, and please, let me state for the record that now, 20 years later, my thought is this. You can't blame your parents for your own bad behavior. It's up to you to control your own actions and to turn away from bad direction. You can't go be an asshole and say, well, my parents were jerks, what do you expect from me? That is bullshit. A cop-out. But back then, as a 17-year-old, it was hard for me not to hate them and blame them for every single one of my problems. One day after school, I was sitting at a bus stop in a bad part of town. I sat there waiting for the bus. I was hungry. I was tired. I was wishing I could be one of the lucky people who were in cars, driving straight to their destinations without stopping for 30 other people in the same vehicle. I looked up at a truck, and I saw a particular man's head looking at me. I focused on his face. It was my father. We met eyes for a split second, and he saw that I noticed him. Just when I thought he would stop and give me a ride home, he turned his head and he kept driving. I couldn't believe he left me sitting there. I watched as his truck got smaller and smaller and smaller. I had dealt with a lot of crap from him through my short life, but that really got to me. It crushed me pretty hard to see that truck pass me by. That incident set me off. I had troubling episodes of mania and violence in the following months, and I started feeling really worthless and was basically full of rage inside. Jimmy and I started arguing, but not just arguing like regular people, we argued like typical Hollywood people, violently. One of the times I dove at him and choked him as hard as I could, and then started socking him with all of my might. I could practically kick his ass. He crouched over and let me go at it, and he never hit me back. One time he shoved me against a wall, but that was it, and in my crowd that was basically standard. I felt such guilt after my violent episodes that I crawled out of the room, locked myself in a bathroom, and beat myself with anything I could find, a brush, a curling iron, whatever. The second thing that affected me was that my mother threw me out of the house for not having a job. I know that I should definitely have had a job after school, but the way she went about the whole thing really hurt me. She told me that I had like a week to get a job, and if I didn't get one by then, I had to get out. It was almost as if she knew I couldn't get one that quickly and was just trying to get rid of me. I was surprised at the whole thing, taken aback at the suddenness of the situation. I mean, I was out partying all the time. I was not some great teenager. I'm sure she had to do what she had to do, but her delivery was just so detached. I remember being really hurt when looking at her eyes. They were just dead, flat, black, no emotion. She did not care where I went. I just had to get the fuck out. Bye-bye. So I went and lived with Jimmy until I got a job. I tried not thinking about my parents, but I couldn't help it sometimes. I felt like, damn, the 2 people who are supposed to love me and care about me no matter what don't give 2 shits about me. My mom told me to go kill myself, and my dad not only laughed at me for being institutionalized, but he just drove by and left me sitting at a bus stop in a bad part of town. Now, mind you, I forgot all about this stuff when I was buzzed and out with my friends, but from time to time, I had to face my situation. I had these really intense feelings that I was not mature enough to deal with in any other way. I was so deeply hurt by these people that it stabbed at a spot really, really deep inside of me, a spot deeper than I thought my body could go. Trisha and Pierre went with Jimmy and me to go see a tricks show at the Roxy the next weekend. Trisha was interested in walking down the rest of the Sunset Strip and seeing the whiskey. When our guys started talking inside the club, we left the club and we walked down there. We didn't discuss what we would say to our boyfriends when we got back. I just assumed we were going to tell them what we did. I didn't see it as anything wrong. When they asked us where we went, we said at the exact same time 2 different things. I said, the whiskey, and she said, nowhere. And the guys were like, which is it? Trisha, we went to the whiskey, come on. She looked at them with a straight face and said, no, we didn't. I wanted to strangle her in her white lace-up rubber dress. I called her the next day and said, why did you lie? She said she didn't lie. She was trying to save her relationship. She said Pierre was highly jealous and she couldn't tell him she was at another club without him there. I told her that I understood, but by doing that she was making me out to look like a liar. She said she valued him over me. Sorry, but that's the way it was going to go. I hung up thinking, oh, hell no. This bitch needs to slow her roll. I asked Jimmy to take me over there so I could talk to her. He told me not to do anything stupid because he was in a band with Pierre and he didn't want to ruin it. Yeah, I said. He took me over to her place. She was very cocky right off the bat and wouldn't talk to me in the parking lot. She insisted we go by the pool where people were hanging out. Fine. I followed her, looking at her tiny cut-off denim shorts and little red halter top like the girl in Warrant's cherry pie video. I tried to talk to her and reason with her, and she was bitchy, smirky, and rude. I sat for about 5 minutes and stared straight ahead, trying to compose myself. I looked down at my shoe. I should have been thinking, why am I wearing these awful half-boot, half-shoes? But instead I thought, I'm going to beat this bitch with my shoe. I have to calm down. Jimmy's going to be pissed. Then after some time I said, I can do what I want to do or what other people want me to do. She cocked an eyebrow, smirked, and said, oh, what do you want to do? While chomping open-mouthed on some gum. I said, you know what? It's no wonder you have no friends. I didn't even finish my sentence. The cocked eyebrow did it. I immediately jumped on her, ripped her head back by her hair, and started socking her in the face. She curled up in a little ball and tried to protect her face, but I pounded right over her hands. She was screaming, squawking, and shrieking. I could hear the sound of my fist slamming her face over and over and over. Curse words were coming out of my mouth that I didn't even know existed, like that kid in A Christmas Story. I even scared myself a little bit. In mid-pounding, a lady came out of an apartment and screamed at me to get off of Trisha or she was calling the police. I didn't feel like being arrested again. I stopped, but I wasn't done. I got behind Trisha and ripped her up by her hair, and I put my mouth in her ear and I said, if you fucking scratch me, if you even think about touching me, you fucking bitch, I will kill you. I will beat you into the fucking ground, do you hear me? And she nodded with her hands up in the air. Then, the best part, I said, I have a job interview tomorrow and I don't need to be all scratched up. Always thinking ahead. Then I threw her scrawny ass across a bunch of lawn chairs and she went flying. I was thinking, damn, either I'm really strong or she's really light. I think it was both. We composed ourselves and walked out of the same gate, her in front of me. She stopped and turned around toward me, her hair looking like a firecracker had been set off on her head. Blood was peeking out from one of her nostrils. She screamed, "Get out!" and pointed in the general direction of a maze of paths in her apartment building. I quietly walked past her, saying nothing. I let her have her dignity. I guess she needed that. I walked back to the parking lot and got in Jimmy's car. He had no clue what had happened until I showed him my hand. It was swollen and red. I was afraid he was going to be pissed at me, but he just told me that I wasn't using the right part of my hand to punch, and he showed me how to make a fist, and he told me to tuck my fingers so they wouldn't get hurt. We went back to his place, and I iced my hand. Trisha dropped out of school with only a few months to go until we graduated our senior year. She never got a diploma. A small twinge of guilt hit me. I had affected her life. I had prevented her from achieving a milestone. But as always, I quickly washed it away with some booze. Life wasn't easy. Tough shit for her. It wasn't my fault she was afraid to come back to school or whatever was wrong. I know. I was an asshole. I really was. The girl was bitchy, yes, but she got beat down pretty badly over something pretty trivial. And I just did not know how to deal with anger. I didn't know how to solve issues with people without being violent, and I could not control my impulses. I definitely would not do that today, but my mindset at that time was one of extremes. I made it to my job interview with no scratches and got a job at the beauty supply store. The girl who hired me, Gwen, told her manager on the phone, "She's really pretty. I can't believe she doesn't already have a job." Pretty? I thought. Was that my qualification? Gwen was a total bimbo. It was totally exaggerated to where I thought she had to be kidding. She was in her early 20s and bottom-heavy, with big pores and blonde hair. She giggled at everything. She showed me briefly how to run credit cards and how to count the drawer. Then she showed me how to bring the money to the bank in a deposit bag and drop it in the merchant's slot. I had to put a certain amount in the store safe for the next day's drawer. As I tried to remember it all, she said, "Did you get all that? Good. See ya!" and bounced out to play tennis. I was like, "Wait! Come back!" But she never did. I ended up figuring it out after much trial and error. I remember customers having to help me run their credit cards. They had to get behind the counter and show me how to do it. Raz and Michael came into that store with their little rolled-up sweats and visors, and they stole the beauty products right in plain sight. Raz walked around filling up a basket with nail polish and hairspray as if he owned the joint. Stealing beauty supplies for myself felt justified for some reason, but I felt a little weird letting Raz just rob the place without batting a mascara-caked eyelash. I didn't want to get fired. I worked there part-time in the evenings and on the weekends. I enjoyed being around all of the beauty supplies and the cosmetics. I always gave myself manicures and tried on the makeup, leaving my germs all over products that I eventually sold to other people. The store was soon bought by a discount chain and stripped of all the good products. Gwen was gone with the old storefront, and by that time I was an old pro, ringing up bottles of Clairol hair color without even looking. I eventually memorized every code to every type of hair color and could key it in on the 10 key without even getting off the phone to stop my gossip. I didn't even greet the customers. I just talked about getting drunk and cute guys to whoever was on the other end of that line, and the customers had to stand there and listen. I only stopped to look at them when I figured out their total and it was time for them to pay me, and then it was back to gossiping. I was a totally rude employee, and one time I even fell asleep on some cases of perms in the back. I had to wear a smock that said, "Ask me, I'm an expert." I looked at the thing and I thought, the only thing I'm an expert on is partying. People were always coming in the store with hair dye issues, namely fixing a color they didn't like. After studying a color wheel and a couple of pamphlets, I said, "All right, fine, I'm an expert now. Ask away." I started helping people with color corrections, toners, bleach, peroxide levels, everything under the sun. I understood the acrylic nail supplies. I tried out the waxes and provided transsexuals with instructions on waxing their nether regions. My father showed up on my sister's birthday that year. It was hard on us because we hadn't talked to him in a while. I tried to be nice to him and forgive him because he was so pathetic. He kept telling us how miserable he was. I got sick of hearing it after a while. I just wanted it to stop. He didn't ask us how we were or what was going on in our lives. While we were glad to know he wasn't having the time of his life, being away from his family, we were hurt that he was not interested in knowing who we were, who we had grown into, or how his departure had affected us. He tried to curse a lot and try to act tough and relate to us, but we were embarrassed and disgusted. I knew I could not trust him, and I distanced myself from him emotionally. We always reacted to seeing our father, even if we didn't realize it. My sister insisted it wasn't affecting her, but she cried at school the next day and said she didn't know what was wrong. The day after that, she found herself crying at work, with no explanation. She was then caught stealing at Newberry's, and soon after that, she got in a car accident with her new boyfriend. My sister was out of Middleton by that time and had entered the 10th grade at the local public high school in Canoga Park. It was very different for her. She was in a pretty bad area. One time I was driving by there and I saw a cloud of dust along with a ton of flashing lights in my rear view mirror, and from behind me came the sound of sirens. A car was being chased by the police and was coming right toward me. I was on a single lane part of the street and there was nowhere to pull over. The car got closer and closer to me, and before it slammed right into me, I pulled my car over onto somebody's front lawn and let the whole train of chaos pass me. My sister was really into the Red Hot Chili Peppers during those years, and we laughed at the songs together. It was one of the few things that allowed us to still relate to each other, though we were living separate lives with separate crowds. We always bonded on the Chili Peppers. We sang songs like Yertle the Turtle and other funky, weird songs that were very her. Some were even very me, such as Stone Cold Bush. It was no surprise that she chose that funny music because things were not very laughable in our lives then. My mother started dating a new guy that spring. He was an old family friend, a friend of my dad's. He was very nice to me and complimentary. My mother didn't like it. I remember she was sitting on the couch with him one day, and she called me over to them and told me to turn around so she could check out the back of my legs because she said she could see cellulite. She started pointing it out to him as if I weren't there. She asked me what I had been eating. I yawned and filed my fingernail and blew dust off of it, lifted my eyebrows, which translated to, "Bitch, please. No need to try so hard to make me look bad. And by the way, I am now an old pro at dealing with envious women. This shit is nothing new to me." Although my mind was set to only one dial, Hollywood, there were a few times when things appeared to be more normal, like in my journalism class at school. I got some validation from working on the school paper, and I started to think about maybe not being such a die-hard party girl. I had figured out that wearing my Hollywood clothes to school was a big mistake. I learned my lesson in 10th grade, and by my senior year, people had stopped yelling things at me on the school grounds. I still wanted to show that I was a Hollywood chick because I was very proud of it, but I didn't want to look like a stripper. Well, not at school anyway. I was writing for the school paper. For goodness sake, I had to have a little bit of credibility. I tried getting away from too rocker of an image. I let the purple fade from my hair, letting it become more natural. I swept it into a long ponytail and wore my big hoop earrings. I couldn't buy a whole new wardrobe, but a pack of white men's t-shirts helped me to hide my cleavage and cover myself better. I still wore Jimmy's Cat House t-shirts from time to time, one in black and one in white, both with bright pink writing, and his lip service shorts with little skulls and daggers, but mostly I looked pretty normal for the times. I enjoyed feeling more accepted at school. I even felt like a regular teenager on some days. When I wrote stories for the school paper, I felt important and smart instead of a freak, a troubled kid, or a tough girl. I realized I didn't need to try and separate myself so much from the norm. I didn't need to pigeonhole myself. That would only take away opportunities. I started to feel better about being a student and a person as a whole. I started to feel more valued academically. Journal entry, March 12, 1991. I just interviewed Coach Green, who kicked me out of PE in 10th grade. He said I conduct a very good interview. I thought he was kidding because he was just grunting and stuff, but he wasn't. He said, "You're very intelligent. You just don't let people know it. You got me talking, and now you filled up that whole paper. Most people couldn't do that." I felt good. I was wearing all black on Friday, and it made me feel dark. Just putting on white made me feel more alive. I told Jimmy I didn't like wearing his black lip service jacket with those skulls and the crosses on it anymore. He was insulted. I mean, I used to find it so cool, but now it looks evil to me. I told him that I got much more respect dressing like a normal teenager, and I liked being respected. He got defensive and said, "Hey, I don't care who likes me. This is what I dress like." But I don't like being judged as dark and evil, especially when it doesn't really represent me. Jimmy made me feel like a sellout, like I was turning my back on my own kind. The article I wrote for the school paper ended up in a showcase in the office building. I was stunned. I wrote in my journal, "It feels good to work on a newspaper, proofreading it, cutting out misprints with an X-Acto knife, pressing new letters in their places." Kids were watching me from the other side of the glass as if I was important. They were pretending to look at dictionaries. It's different from being on the literary magazine. I didn't used to think so, but this is real. We sell ads, we lay out the pages, we do interviews, we actually report things. The literary magazine is heavily edited by someone who decides what is creative enough, what is art. I consider art to be a very personal thing. It has to be determined by each person individually. I don't think the magazine has enough different viewpoints. I'm witnessing a lot of censorship going on there. There's a very artistic guy named Roger, who's probably the most talented and creative guy at the school. He keeps writing poems that the teacher finds inappropriate. Every couple of days he comes up with a new one and she shoots it down for being too racy. It sucks that he has to hold back his talent and censor himself, when those are his thoughts and his feelings. I respect him because I want to write things that are raw and truthful. I don't want to hold back either. Roger just wrote on the chalkboard above me, "I lost my spleen to a heartless surgeon." He must be referring to the teacher editing his stuff. Here's the conversation he's having right now with Mrs. Kago. Kago: "Roger, that's so graphic. If this were a college magazine..." Roger: "What's wrong?" "Okay, fine, I can change it to the sheets are damp." Kago: "It's so graphic. Couldn't you veil it a little better?" I went to Raz and Michael's and drove with them to the Strip every weekend, rain or shine. One night, we sat around the Red Restaurant booth in their game room eating hot dogs, thinking of which cartoon characters we would be. Raz was Ichabod Crane, Michael was Doonesbury, and I was Betty Boop. Then they all got ready, complaining that their hair had a wave in it or it needed a trim. They decided whether to make their hair stick straight or a little poofy, or maybe just poofy on the bangs. They each did their makeup and piled on bracelets and necklaces and spritzed on colognes and perfumes. Sometimes I went over and just laid under the covers with Michael, while Raz and their new bandmate, Holly, practiced songs on their guitars. They never ended up playing anywhere from what I can recall. Holly had a bloated face and pretty bad skin. He tried to keep his skin covered with his hair, which was an outright disaster in and of itself. It looked like an explosion of burned straw. Michael and I thought of funny things that happened that week and laughed so hard we rolled up into little balls and held our stomachs out of breath. One of the things we could not stop laughing about was when some girl backhanded Raz in the mouth for being rude. He flicked her in the mouth twice, and then once on her ear. He was so proud of himself and told everybody about his flicking, which was, of course, feminine and wimpy. We also couldn't stop laughing about the story of Holly falling asleep in the middle of hooking up with the girl. She got pissed, smacked him to wake him, and it startled him. He jumped 10 feet in the air, and he said, "Where's the fire?" A new guy came into the crowd named Stacy. I don't remember if he was there before me and I just never saw him, or he was out of town or what. He just kind of showed up one night. I know he was from New York and he was a friend of somebody's, but no more details come to mind. He looked sort of like Howard Stern, but with tons of makeup on. He wore super red lipstick, lots of pearls, and crazy polka dot clothes and platform boots. Michael always said he looked like Herman Munster, and often did the impression of Herman getting mad and jumping up and down, saying, "Darn, darn, darn, darn," while the whole house shook. Anyway, I detailed one of the nights with Stacy in my journal. April 8th, 1991. Stacy Starr from Stars from Mars walked in the door with like 10-inch platform shoes, red lipstick, and pearls. He's easily 7 feet tall. I'm surprised his head didn't smack the door jamb. Even with all that makeup, he still sounds like a tough New Yorker with a deep voice. Raz said, "Hey, you big-nosed fuck, what's up, dude? Hey, does your nose get in the way when you kiss a girl?" Stacy looked at him without missing a beat and said, "Does it get in the way when I kiss you? Well then." We tried to cut through the Bellage Hotel parking lot to find a place to park later that night, and some guy wouldn't move his car. Holly, the New Yorker that he is, jumped out of the car to fight the guy, and the security broke it up. He should probably change his name from Holly to something like Carmine. Not too long ago, in front of the Bellage, was a screaming crowd full of girls, because New Kids on the Block were staying there. They are really, really popular with teenagers right now. Well, normal teenagers anyway.